In one of the greatest episodes of South Park ever made, Cartman and the boys start playing World of Warcraft. But the strongest player on their server begins terrorizing the world.
Oh my god! He killed Kenny!
Reaching a level so high that even the game's admins couldn't stop him. In an attempt to save the server, they grind for weeks, sacrificing their time and bodies to ultimately become victorious. And although this is an exaggerated example, it shows the feeling of accomplishment that they and many others got playing MMOs when they've put in the effort to experience results. Now, can you imagine if instead the episode went like this?
We can't get to a higher level because that dude doesn't let us finish quests. That's why we need to just
use my mom's credit card to boost our characters.
Mom!
What, hon?
Give me your credit card.
All of the sudden, this story's not so great, is it? Now, I think I speak for most of us when I say we don't want to grind for hours on end like the old days of MMOs just to come out on top in a video game. But what I am saying is that at its core, the art of the MMORPG is lost. They've been gamified to the point of prioritizing instant satisfaction over immersion, and many players have unfortunately become desensitized to the interests of the companies invading their play space. Something like a level boost, for instance, which essentially is paying for instant power, arguably the most irresponsible thing an MMO could offer to their players. It completely guts the hero's journey. And game companies have used the natural affinity that players have to take the path of least resistance to succeed as rationale for continuing to offer features that undermine the entire purpose of the MMO genre: to immerse players together in a world more amazing than our own, providing an experience so engaging that it makes the player feel like they are wasting money when they pay to skip it. So why? Why do we keep falling into this trap? Well, for one, MMOs have begun catering to more and more of the players who are prone to just pay for a dopamine hit instead of demand good content. Players who, at their core, aren't true MMO fans. But worse than that, many true MMO fans have been conditioned to spend money to skip content because that content has been mediocre for so long. In a lot of ways, we don't even know as a community what we should demand from our games anymore.
What the heck does that mean?
I don't know.
We ultimately accept the status quo, that this is just the way MMOs are now, instead of demanding better. So why do we pay to skip content? And is it our fault? That terrible sinking feeling you get when you find out you accidentally took off the wrong week of work for the launch of a new MMO because you used a calendar from last year. Or the urge you got to play that MMO in the first place even though it didn't interest you, just because all your friends were. Or because you have no friends and getting hyped about the same game with a community of like-minded people is the closest thing you'll have to real ones. FOMO, or fear of missing out, is something companies are well aware of because it becomes their best rationale to players for offering content skips. The rationale goes something like this.
And that's why we actually came up with the level 58 one-time boost, paid boost for characters, because we want people that maybe didn't get to experience Classic and want to come back into Burning Crusade to not miss out on that moment, to get to come in and play with their friends, go through that dark portal and enter Hellfire Peninsula right away.
Ah, yes. You can't put a price on friendship. Well, Blizzard Entertainment did, and apparently it's worth $40. But the real cost is something that's brushed under the rug. like the lifeless world left behind with all the dead zones that players skipped over with the level boost. The worst part is even when only a few people do this, it further incentivizes others who would have normally enjoyed leveling through those areas to skip them too, because they've become more dead than Blizzard's reputation. It's because good MMOs are designed to have an active population to truly be great. A population in World of Warcraft's case that has been utterly bloodsucked by the Activision Blizzard executives, ultimately forcing players who wanted to enjoy that part of the game to spend money to skip it against their own interests. But let's not jump to conclusions. There are still plenty of areas that are greatly populated, like the ones with all the dungeons and zones that the botters use to further undermine the integrity of in-game systems, flooding the server with hyper-farmed gold and materials that disincentivize people from going out into the world themselves, from experiencing the game, while also unimmersing every other player who happens to see the bots out in the world because they stick out worse than Jared Fogle at the Kids' Choice Awards. Botters who not only pay the company for the boost, but for the game's monthly fee, all while increasing the subscription total for said game's quarterly earnings reports. If you don't think this is an absolutely fucked system by design, you're lying to yourself. It's the planned obsolescence of content by a video game, or essentially purposefully allowing your product to be bad so people pay to fix or replace it. Just like when your favorite class becomes obsolete due to a content patch. And if you want to stay up to date, FOMO, with everyone else, FOMO, who didn't get fucked by the balance change that clearly forces you to re-roll to compete, FOMO, you'll have to go into the cash shop to level up another nomosexual. This has sadly become the business model of many MMORPGs, pushing new and dumping old content, whether it's intentional or not. I talked to one of the original designers of World of Warcraft, Kevin Jordan, and he said content that not everyone can experience just doesn't give developers enough bang for their buck. It's why at a certain point, games put such a heavy emphasis on the quality and amount of their endgame content. All the dedicated players are already there to give them that bang, and the more that show up, the bigger the bang. And the bigger the bang, the bigger the FOMO for those not there. It's a business decision, with the primary goal to sell hype to gamers. And as we've seen throughout history, MMO fans are by far the most susceptible to overhyping games and their content. Imagine if a game like Jump King allowed you to skip to the end. No one would ever do it, because it's a platformer that once you get to the end, the content stops. And part of what makes the game great is the journey to get there, sharing your fails and hardships with other people who went through the same trial. When the incentive of the destination is greater than the accomplishment of the journey, people pay to skip content. I think many of these people mistake them liking endgame more than other aspects of the game for what is actually the developers ultimately making the endgame content better than other aspects of the game. It's an overemphasis on the destination rather than the journey to make it easier to make more money. Endgame PvP is no different. Although, for this one, it's really hard to blame anyone. It just wouldn't be realistic to balance PvP at all levels of play for most games. And it's a big reason why even all the RPers and dungeon heroes of MMOs should want world PvP in their game, even if they're not a part of it. It gives the caveman PvPers an outlet to blow their load on each other while leveling, so the game doesn't feel obligated to over-cater to any single type of playstyle. Because when they do, it makes it easier for developers to fall into that same trap. Because at a certain point, many games just kinda ditch making leveling and the world around it matter. If leveling did matter, it might offer something players needed in the future. Some rare item, secret ability, profession, reputation, story choice, or even an unexplored area to change a character's trajectory. Because of this, they may be more prone to play out leveling their character. Hell, throw a world boss in a low-level zone that grants access to an endgame raid, just so higher-level players have incentive to go help the lobies. Let the noobs help in some way by using items they get from questing in the zone. Give them a reward for helping too, so they don't feel like an asshole for getting one-shot by a god when they were just trying to collect 12 rocks for the talking mushroom. Content like this is fun and encourages socializing. It's the sign of a fully cohesive world. But why create this when you can just have players pay you to sit on your ass instead and achieve the same result? It's totally backwards. Another way to make leveling content actually matter is to just make entry-level endgame content challenging enough so that players feel the need to progress on their own just to learn their class, instead of, weighing down the entire group. Ask yourself this. Is it worth it in the MMO you play to revisit old content in some way, shape, or form? If the answer is no, it's probably pointless. There has to be an incentive, and if there's not, it at least has to be fun. Whether that's a game's combat, replayability, time spent running from place to place, I'm not going to go into every way a developer can make their game more fun, because what is more important is how developers now intentionally design parts of their game to be unfun.
If you are releasing quality of life features on a game that is not even released, it implies that the existence of those features makes the experience worse. And so what you are doing is you are creating a problem and then paying yourself to solve it.
Korean MMOs, for instance, have just become one massive psychology experiment to see how much money they can squeeze out of their players. And while their high-budget games are breathtaking, incorporating fluid next-gen combat, underneath they are a soulless husk whose ulterior motive is not to immerse, but to profit.
So the only reason that this would be worth it as a player would be if it was going to put you over the top to a new tier like it would for me. So that would bump me up to this mystic damage plus 240, which is a substantial increase to my mystic damage value.
Initially making you fall in love with the world, letting you sink in some time to get attached, then gating progression that can only be sped up by paying. On one hand, there's World of Warcraft, which started as a love project and slowly degraded over time, causing older aspects of the game to be neglected and then paid to skip. And on the other hand, there's Korean MMOs, which are launched with these monetization ideas baked into their design, with the ultimate goal of trapping a player they hooked into their game, urging them to spend money to reach his or her goals without there even being a second thought. Players have become so conditioned, so desensitized to spending to improve their experience, that the swipe of their card is no different to them than the swing of their axe. It seems rare for a game to prioritize the player experience over making money long-term, because companies will purposefully conflate the two and argue that content skips make players happy. This is a myth. And if you believe it to be true, then you don't actually like what makes MMOs great. Demand better from our games. If you are paying to skip content, there is something wrong with the game. World of Warcraft banned the spit emote because an overwhelming portion of the people playing classic Burning Crusade would spit on people who bought the Dark Portal Pass level boost store mount. This is literally the censorship of an entire player base through the banning of a 15-year-old emote. Don't let your voice be silenced. If a game you like adds paid content skips, leave the game. Even if you don't notice the effects in the short term, you will in the long term. Because before we know it, pay to progress will become the norm here in the West. It kinda already is. We finally have a lot of good titles coming out, and I'm optimistic about some of them staying true to their MMO roots. Subscribe to the channel if you like what you heard. I'm excited to cover more of these games as they come out. And thanks to the patrons who make videos like this possible. Don't do anything I wouldn't do out there. Coach out.